Everyone likes to think they know about investing, but how much do you really know? Put your financial knowledge to the test at investor.gov. Before you invest, investor.gov.
Hey there, listeners. It's Brett Molina here.
And I'm Mike Schneider, and welcome back to Talking Tech. Social media companies like Facebook and Twitter continue to face scrutiny over how well they slow the spread of misinformation on their platforms. Now lawmakers want a bill to hold them more accountable.
That's correct, Mike. It's called the Health Misinformation Act. It was introduced by U.S. Senators Amy Klobuchar and Ben Ray Lujan. The act would create an exception under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act related to misinformation that's spread about a public health emergency. So if you haven't heard yet about Section 230, it is a provision within the Communications Decency Act that provides protection for social media companies like Facebook and Twitter against content their users post. However, this provision has been heavily scrutinized by lawmakers as false information related to COVID vaccines, climate change, and the 2020 U.S. presidential election have flourished on social media. This legislation that is being introduced follows remarks from the White House Communication Director, Kate Bedingfield, during an interview on MSNBC earlier this week, where she said the Biden administration will assess whether social media platforms are legally liable for misinformation spread by users. Now, the platforms haven't necessarily been just sitting quietly. They have taken several attempts to try to crack down more aggressively on misinformation that's spread on their platforms, whether it's about the election or COVID. On Monday night, Twitter suspended Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for 12 hours for posting 2 misleading tweets about COVID-19. While they didn't delete the tweets, they did add tags to them that suggested that these tweets had misleading information.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see here what happens because the social media companies have different opinions about Section 230. I may be misreading things, but I think they all know there needs to be some government involvement in regulation of what can be said on the platforms. But I think between Facebook, Twitter, and Google, they have different opinions of how that should be done. And it's interesting because some people on each political side agree that 230 needs to be reworked. So 230, you're going to hear a lot about this in the future. We've written about it in the past. All of our colleagues have touched on this in some fashion. So stick with us at tech.usatoday.com, and we'll be following Section 230 in the days to come. I don't think anybody can figure out right now what's going to happen with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, social media companies, they keep saying they want some form of regulation on this, but they're not sure where. And you've also had lawmakers that flat out say just repeal it completely, which companies like Facebook and Twitter have said if you do that, you kind of are going to ruin kind of a fabric of the internet. And it then becomes extremely difficult to allow users to comment because if anything they say makes the company liable, then that puts them in a very difficult spot. So it is going to be interesting to see how this all pans out and what actually does happen to Section 230.
Yeah, and I understand this immediate attention to health misinformation, which may be easier to get passed along than the whole overhaul or the whole look at 230. So we'll see what they can do on the Hill. Listeners, let's hear from you. Do you care about Section 230? Any thoughts about it, comments, or questions you have beyond Section 230? Other show ideas, you can tell me about them on Twitter at Mike Schneider.
And I'm at Brett Molina 23. Please don't forget to subscribe and rate us or leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you get your podcasts. You've been listening to Talking Tech. We'll be back tomorrow with another quick hit from the world of tech.
Birthdays, holidays, promotions, getting that last sprinkle donut. There's a lot in this world worth celebrating, but nothing is worth celebrating more than knowledge, especially knowledge that'll pay off. Like understanding how compound interest works, knowing how to check your investment professional's background, and figuring out your risk tolerance. Or how about finally understanding all those terms your friends keep throwing around, like ETF, ESG, and ICO? Go to investor.gov today to learn about these investment products and more. How much do you already know about investing? Find out by putting your financial knowledge to the test with our new investment quiz. Investor.gov is your unbiased resource for valuable investment information, tools, and tips. Before you invest, investor.gov.